5:42 in the morning, and the cold in this room feels like it has hands. My name is Garrett John, and you're tuned to 107.9 FM, if the dial still means anything where you are. I'm broadcasting from a basement 2 blocks west of Broad Street, below a shuttered print shop that used to smell like ink and hot paper. Now it smells like dust and diesel, and old coffee soaked into the floor. The air outside is 44 degrees and sliding lower. When I cracked the door to listen a few minutes ago, I heard no engines, no buses, no trash trucks, just the drip of a broken gutter and a distant speaker repeating curfew orders in a language that still catches in my throat. There's no wind to carry sound away, so every little noise sits in the air like a held breath. The city is a stage between lines, and we are waiting for someone to speak. The only reason you can hear me is a used generator that fires if I beg it, and a rack of car batteries that we charge when the sun is kind and the roof is safe. The panels up there are scored with shrapnel marks, glass spider-webbed, but they still drink. The tower we use is not a tower at all, just a length of pipe bolted to a stair rail on the roof with wire strung like a clothesline. Sometimes the signal hits the river and bends. Sometimes it gets lost in broken steel and empty high-rises, and I sound like I'm speaking from inside a jar. If I fade, turn the dial. Come back. I'll be here until the batteries go flat. If this signal's reaching you, drop the first word you hear me say. Prove you're tuned in. If you're waking up for the first time since it happened, if you slept through the first sirens and the first flash and the long streak of silence that followed, I need you to know how we got here. I'm not a soldier. I'm a voice that used to talk about morning traffic and 6 song sets, and I'm very aware that voices like that made things sound simple when they weren't. I won't do that to you now. The first hint that something larger than a power outage or a drill was unfolding came 3 weeks back around 2:13 a.m. The air raid tone cut through the late-night mix, not from our stations, but from the Federal Emergency Band. It repeated without the spoken tag. No, this is a test. No code word. The sky over the river brightened for a moment the way a storm does when lightning hits outside the window, a pale bloom that reflected off the glass towers that still had glass. Phones vibrated off nightstands and then died in a wave, not one by one but together, a soft thud of a world going offline. The bus lights froze at 17th and Market and stayed that way. Traffic slowed and then stopped. Not from fear, but because the chips we stuff into everything had nothing left to say to each other. The hospital generators fired first, then some of the casinos, then the Navy Yard, then the rumors. Someone saw something drop out near the Jersey refineries. Someone said the carriers off the coast shifted anchor. Someone said the satellites we rely on were blind. By sunrise, the newsrooms were taking guesses. Cyber event. Grid fault. Coordinated test of resilience. The posts that came from the big accounts carried the same language like they were reading the same card. Keep calm. Stay home. Conserve power. Boil water if you have it. The boil water piece didn't make sense. Not yet. The city is piped to treatment plants that need power to push and filter and test. And by noon we understood the guess was a warning. The pumps were failing one after another. You could watch the pressure drop by floor in high-rises, like the building itself was tired. I biked through a dead light at Spring Garden with a mic stand across my back and a duffel of cables banging my left knee, and I remember a woman in a blue coat standing in the middle of the crosswalk staring at the sky, like she expected words to hang there and help her decide if she should go to work or go home or go anywhere at all. 3 boys in Sixers hoodies sprinted past me carrying 2 flats of water like trophies. A man stood in the doorway of a corner store with a baseball bat in one hand and a phone in the other, even though the screen was black. The smell of burned plastic came from somewhere you could not point to. The first drones, the small ones, buzzed low enough that you could see their nacelles turning, and then a bigger shape moved behind the gray and made the old radio instinct kick in hard. You lean closer to a speaker when you're scared. I saw heads lift like sunflowers. We all waited. The first broadcast was not ours. It came on 900 AM and 102.1 FM and a handful of other places all at once, like fingers pushing down on many keys to make the same low chord. The voice was crisp and even and full of bland safety words. The translation channel that followed on shortwave repeated the points in English after a few sentences in that other tongue. Curfew at 1900 hours local. Stay off bridges. Surrender personal weapons at collection points. Medical help available at designated centers. You will be screened. Any gathering over 5 people will be dispersed. Interference with communications will be punished. It did not say by whom. It did not have a flag, a seal, a name. It had a tone before and after that made my teeth ache a little. We learned to mute the volume for the tone. The curfew trucks appeared at dusk like they had been parked behind the next block waiting for their cue. They weren't American machines. The lines were wrong, the grills were wrong, and the sound they made was more throat than chest. They moved slow because they did not need to move fast. The city tried to explain itself to itself and failed. The mayor spoke from a generator-lit podium and thanked partners, which is what you say when you cannot say who. The governor sounded like he was speaking from a hallway and used the word temporary many times. The federal voice, in the daylight hours when it still answered, said we were working with coalition forces to maintain order and ensure humanitarian aid. The word coalition tasted old and jagged, like a nail. It was the word we used to hear in other people's wars. I asked someone I trust who used to wear a uniform what he thought, and he told me something I didn't want to hear. If they're in our air, if they're on our bands, and if they're on our streets inside of 24 hours, then this was planned with our maps in their pockets. He said the first wave wasn't meant to win, but to blind and freeze. He said the second wave was meant to sit. He said you don't have to fight block by block if everyone stays home and your speakers do the work. He said the worst thing to watch for was silence. You can work around noise. You've been living the rest of this, so I don't need to dress it up. Food moved through this city on trucks you don't see, guided by data you never touch. The trucks stopped, the cold rooms warmed, the cash registers that nobody calls cash registers anymore blinked and died. The first day, people were patient. The second day, they traded. The third day, they took. After that, it depended on your street. Some blocks formed circles around the old ones, like the way we shield a candle in wind. Some blocks drew lines and put sharp things behind them. The cargo cranes down at the port swung hard, and then stalled like a man who stands up too fast. The Navy Yard gates closed, and everybody watched the water. News gets born on the water in this town. The bridges were shut down and then guarded, both sides. At night, the loudspeakers named the bridges and told you to stay away like they were dangerous animals in a zoo. Ben Franklin, Walt Whitman, Tacony Palmyra, Betsy Ross. Every name in that list felt like we were losing another relative one by one. I promised I would keep this real, and I will. To the north, out by the airfield, there were flashes 2 nights in a row right after sunset. Some say that was a fight that didn't go our way. The third night, there were no flashes, only the steady blink of something at high altitude moving in a pattern that wasn't a circle or a figure eight or anything you learn in pilot school. I do not think we own that shape. It sits there like a nail in the sky. It doesn't chase, it marks. They use a word for things like that sounds like a person's name. I won't say it because words like that have weight, but you can look up and see the dot and understand it the same way without saying it. The old radio books on the shelf down here say that if you have a steady high eye, you own the map below it. You can tell a truck from a tank from a crowd. You can tell a warm roof from a cold roof. You can tell if a generator like mine is running. So I run the generator in short sprints when I can and use stored power for the rest. When I pause, it's not for drama. It's to make heat in a coffee can with a candle and to save the crank on the inverter. I said I wouldn't bring callers on air, and I won't. But I will tell you what people have told me when we pass notes and when we trade batteries for news. A woman from Port Richmond said the patrols shine lights into second-story windows just after curfew to see if anyone is moving in the strip of shadow between blinds and glass. A man from South Street said the drones favor the alley between 8th and 9th and ride it like a canal, which means you should cross it at angles and fast if you must. A kid from Fairhill with a busted arm said they go quiet when they slide over the old churches, like they shift into some other mode there. He didn't say holy, he just said quiet. I don't know why. Out by the river near the old sugar refinery, someone painted over the cameras, and for a day and a night nobody spoke through the speakers on that block. People came out and stood in the open and cried and then went back inside. They didn't celebrate. They just took a breath without someone else telling them when. I need to give you what we know about the radio picture, because this is a radio, and that's my job. 107.9 FM will hold steady, as long as I can keep the PV inverter cool. If you hear me thinning, it's heat inside the rack, not a choke in my chest. If you lose me, try wider steps on the dial. I drift about 0.2 when the room swings cold to warm, so don't be strict with the number. On AM, 820 and 900 are flooded at the top of each hour with the occupation feed. They recite curfew and drop a list of support centers that move like shells in a street game. Do not go because a voice from a speaker tells you that there's bread at 28th and Federal at noon. If bread exists at 28th and Federal at noon, it will exist no more by 12:10, and the cameras on the poles will have a good record of who stopped to try. Shortwave is an ugly sea, but there are signals in it that don't belong to them. You will need wire, a spool if you can get one, and somewhere high where you won't be seen. Stretch it long. Listen close to the edges of 5 and 7 megahertz at the bottom of the hour. You might hear a man in Ohio who reads names of towns where lights still shine in the day. You might hear a woman near Roanoke who reads crop reports that sound like prayers. Nobody gives their names. They use plain speech and tell you what they see from porches and hills. I trust them more than the 4 bars that used to sit at the top of my phone. Here is what you do for water. You don't need a lab, and you don't need a fancy filter to live through the week. Let the tap run for a second in the morning if there's any pressure left. Fill every clean thing that can hold liquid. Let it sit. If it's cloudy, pour it through a t-shirt that you boiled first. If it smells like a pool, let it breathe. If you can boil, boil for 1 hard minute. If you can't boil, you can still make it safer. 2 drops of plain bleach per liter, 8 drops per gallon, shake and wait 30 minutes. If it smells like bleach after that, let it sit with the cap off a while. I'm saying simple things, because simple things are what keep you alive and what the speakers never say. For heat, candles under clay pots work, but they eat oxygen. Crack a window the width of your thumb. Keep matches in a jar with a screw top. Keep lighters in your socks when you sleep so they don't die in the cold. Eat the food in the freezer first when the power goes, then the fridge, then the pantry. If you have neighbors with kids, give them the peanut butter. If you have an old person on your floor, give them the soup. If you have someone who knows how to fix, trade them anything for their time. A man or woman who can make a bike move again is worth more than the last box of cookies at the back of your cupboard. I know what sits behind all of this practical talk. I know it because I feel it when I stop talking and the room is still. I am tired. My mouth feels like it's full of chalk. The light in here is bad, and the clock on the wall runs slow because the batteries are counterfeit and always were, and this is the first time any of us care. There are moments when I set the mic down and press my palm to the painted cinder block and think about driving west with a half tank and a paper map and never looking back. Then I remember the checkpoints on the Schuylkill, and I remember the way those drones drop in threes like a hawk with two brothers. And I remember that the map was printed when the old ramp at Girard still existed, and it doesn't now, and even if it did, the bridge is shut. So I stay. I speak because someone spoke when I was little. A weatherman in a snowstorm who sounded calm enough that my mother smiled even though the power was gone. We have had voice through worse than this. We kept voice after the river flooded 96, and we kept voice when the towers fell, and we kept voice in blackouts and storms because someone stayed near a transmitter and decided that breath was worth burning to make sound. I'm not saying this is the same. It isn't. Those were storms and strikes and failures. This is a hand closing over the whole board. You asked for real talk about what happened, not a bedtime story. Here is the blunt cut. It looks like they hit our sky first. Not in the old way with fire and debris you can see with the naked eye, but by stepping on the wires that sit above clouds. The birds we rely on to tell trucks where to turn and planes where to land and phones how to find each other were blinded. Some were burned. You can tell the difference by the way GPS tries and then gives up. That took hours, not days. While that happened, they slid a knife into the grid at points that were already weak, places where we postponed fixes for years, where the transformers were old and the spares were in other states because that is the sort of bet you make when there's no war lurking. Then came a flood of noise on the bands our power plants used to talk to themselves. The plants did what they are coded to do when they cannot trust their own eyes. They shut down to save themselves from tearing apart. That is not failure. That is safety. Safety becomes failure when there is no one left to stand and start them again, and the men with guns at the gate wear strange patches and say, "Wait your turn." The third piece came rolling down I-95 in the night, and I think you know what those wheels carried. They didn't have to be many. They had to be first. You put a small number of quiet men with quiet machines at key places, and you force everyone else to think hard before they act. That is how you sit on a city without blowing it to dust. You buy the roof instead of the property. You install the lock before the doors are even priced. I'm hearing more low-band sweeper bursts than I did yesterday, like someone is raking the dial to see who's awake. If you're building a radio at home out of parts and hope, keep your antenna inside when you can and pull it in fast when you're not listening. The sweepers are not magic, but they can point toward noise that shouldn't be there. If you are using a small handheld on FRS or GMRS to talk on your block, keep it short and schedule your times. Don't ramble. Don't say names. Don't say someone's apartment number. Say the corner or the alley or the second roof. If it helps, pretend you are 11 and you are making up a spy language with a friend and you're trying to make your little sister mad because she can't decode it. That little game feels childish until it keeps a good person from getting questioned in a stairwell for an hour by men who don't understand your words and don't care to. I'm not the only voice out here. The occupation feed is loud and clean and layered with that high whine that sets your teeth on edge for a reason. But there are others. Somewhere up near Trenton, a voice I think I know broadcasts on 103.3 with music recorded off a dusty turntable and lists of open clinics that don't ask to see your papers. Down in South Philly, a bar owner strings a long wire to a flagpole and reads roll calls for his block. Live check-ins with one word aloud. Here. A school teacher on 5.330 megahertz reads pages from a first aid manual and then tells stories about her father's garden and how many tomatoes a family of 4 needs to make it past August. These are not war plans. They are not speeches. They are stitches. You sew enough of them, and a city that has been cut will stop bleeding for a time. If you're listening from outside the ring roads, if you're out in Bucks or out past King of Prussia, or down near the farms where fingers in the dirt still mean something every day, your job right now is the job people always do when towns get shaken. Look after the water, look after the kids, look after the old ones, look after the food, and look after the stories. Power will come and go. The stories need to stay. We do not let the speakers on poles tell our children what happened here in their own city. We tell them ourselves. We say the lights went out, and men we did not vote for spoke our laws through loudspeakers, and we held each other anyway. We planted potatoes in cut plastic barrels. We learned the way to open a paint can without bending the lid so it would seal again. We burned coffee grounds to knock down a smell in a room with a broken pipe. We taught teenagers how to clean a wound without flinching. We watched for the green glint of a drone lens and knew when to move and when to stay still. We whispered the names of bridges in order, and we did not forget them. We counted the days without fresh milk, and we did not let that number become a measure of our worth. I'm going to give you a list before the batteries dip, and then I'm going to go upstairs and move the panel tarp so the sun can find us when it crawls up between the towers. Write these down if you can. Tape the paper inside your pantry door. Save them for your neighbor whose hands shake when he asks you what to do. 1. Water, as I said, 2 drops of bleach per liter, 8 per gallon, or boil for 1 minute. If it's snowing where you are and you're melting snow, remember that snow is mostly air. A pot that looks full will give you a cup. Pack it down. 2. Heat, candles, and clay or rocks that hold warmth. Thumb-wide crack on a window. CO is a silent thief, and it does not care that you tried your best. 3. Food. Eat down your thawing stores. Share the heavy things. Trade cans for skills and not for promises. 4. Light. Save your batteries by keeping tasks for daylight and by using mirrors to steal sun into dark corners. Reflectors and bike lights will do more than you think. 5. First aid. Soap beats fancy disinfectant when used right. Clean water beats almost everything else. Pressure and time stop bleeding more often than heroics. 6. Safety. Lock your stairwell door from the inside with a wedge and a screw eye, not with a chair. Chairs slide. A wedge bites. 7. Radio. Listen more than you speak. Schedule your check-ins. Pick one time in the morning and one near dusk, and do not drift from it unless smoke is rising. 8. Neighbors. Write the names and apartment numbers of people on your floor who will need you and keep that paper where a stranger won't find it. Check them on a schedule that becomes a habit. 9. Hope. Not as a word you put on a sign, but as a list of small tasks that you can finish before sundown. The list is the antidote to the voice on the pole that tells you your job is to obey and wait. You are not furniture in your own home. I can hear the bass note of the speaker truck coming down Broad, slow. That same recorded loop about curfew enforcement and ration lines and medical screening compliance. They will say there's a registration point today at the sports complex, because big, empty parking lots make people feel like something official is happening. If you go, go because you must, and not because a voice said you should. Bring only what you can lose without losing yourself. Do not bring papers that tell your full story. They will keep them. Do not go alone if you can help it. Make a plan for when you do not come back on time that does not involve panic, but habits. If I'm not back by noon, you knock on 2 doors and say 1 sentence. Then you come home and you boil water and you listen for 107.9 at 1 after the hour. I'll be back at 1 after the hour if the inverter stays cool and if the meter on the wall doesn't lie to me again. If I miss that mark, try again at 19 after. Those are my slots. That's how we do this. Not with big words, not with speeches, but with promises we can keep. My name is Garrett John. I am on 107.9 FM. I am somewhere beneath a city that still belongs to the people who built it and walked it and sang in it and held hands on its steps. I am not leaving. Breathe steady. Drink warm. Speak low. Write the names. I'll talk to you soon. It's 9:03 a.m. here in what used to be called the City of Brotherly Love, and if you're still tuning in, then your radio is stronger than mine feels right now. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM, still running on the hum of a generator that coughs like an old man every half hour. The air outside is warming a little, though it doesn't matter much. The streets are still cold in spirit. I opened the back door a crack before coming on just now, and the only sound was the scrape of a trash bin moving in the wind and the drone of one of their patrols in the distance. That hollow metallic whine carries for blocks. It makes your chest tighten when you hear it, because you know it means eyes are in the sky, and those eyes are not ours. I don't want to paint you a picture of silence that sounds peaceful. This is not the silence of snow at midnight, or the pause before a song comes back in. It is the kind of silence that tastes like a warning. Storefront gates rattling in the breeze. No laughter from kids going to school. No morning chatter outside the bakeries that used to set out trays by the door. Just empty steps and closed curtains. Some people put up paper over their windows last night, not just to keep out light, but to hide from it. Because when the patrol lights hit glass, you feel like they're taking inventory of what you have left, and sometimes they don't move on. I've been thinking about the way this city used to sound. The trains clattering over Market, the hiss of the trolley wires, the buzz of neon signs that had been broken for a decade, but still tried to hum. All those sounds are gone now, replaced by orders through speakers. They talk about support centers and screening zones and cooperation. The words are chosen carefully, almost too carefully, as if someone who doesn't live here picked them out of a dictionary. We don't say support centers. We say food banks. We say the clinic. They've taken the language and dressed it up to sound like care, but the care is missing. What's left is control. I ran into a man yesterday afternoon on my way to scavenge some batteries from a hardware shop. He used to work at one of the big hospitals across the river. Said he'd been a nurse for 15 years. He told me the occupation feed is right about one thing, the screening zones. But what they don't say is that if you line up there, they check more than your health. They check your pockets, your face, your age, your hands. They take notes. He said he watched one family split apart at the gate. Parents waved through, kids sent elsewhere. No explanation. You don't get to argue, he told me, voice shaking. You just keep moving, or they move you. He hasn't been back to work since. He said he'd rather carry water jugs up 5 flights of stairs for his neighbors than watch that line again. I believe him. And if you're listening out there, if you're thinking of lining up because the voice on the speaker promises something, hear me now. Go only if you have no other choice. Go if hunger is louder than your fear. But if you can, find another way. The warehouses by the waterfront were raided early, but basements and row houses still hide jars, cans, sacks of flour, even when the shelves upstairs are bare. Trade quietly with neighbors you trust. Knock once, then twice, then once again. The little rhythms matter now. A loaf of bread can be worth more than a full day's pay used to be, and water is heavier than gold when you carry it long enough. Some of you out in the suburbs have a different picture than we do in the city. Out there, the fields still whisper when the wind cuts through the corn stubble. You can still hear dogs bark at night, but don't think that means you're safe. Their convoys move along the highways faster than we expected, and their checkpoints aren't just at bridges anymore. They're at ramps and interchanges, at gas stations and farm roads. If you're moving, keep maps that don't need satellites. Keep compasses that don't blink when you tap them. Old tools are honest tools now. I won't lie to you. I'm tired. My voice feels cracked like an old record, and some mornings I wonder if anyone is still twisting the dial to hear me. But then I remember. Silence is what they want. Silence is what lets them own the story. And as long as I can still scratch words into the air, we have a chance to remind each other that this city still belongs to its people, not to the voices on the loudspeakers. If you're still with me, breathe steady. Take stock. Share if you can, and hold fast. I'll keep the signal alive as long as the batteries hold out. It's 2:27 in the afternoon, and I'm still here on 107.9 FM. The signal is thin today, probably riding the haze that settled low over the river. If I drift, twist the dial a little. I'll circle back. The air outside tastes like metal, and the streets have been restless since morning. Patrols rolled heavy through Market and Chestnut, more trucks than I've seen in weeks, like they're nervous about something, or want us to think they are. The loudspeakers are louder than usual too, replaying the same message about compliance with registration. It's strange the way they repeat words like that. Compliance, registration, screening, as if saying them over and over makes them less sharp. But the people who've stood in those lines, they know. Those words cut. I've seen the lines. Out by the old stadium, the parking lots that used to hold tailgates and games now hold bodies standing shoulder to shoulder in the cold. They funnel them through fences like cattle. Some come out with a paper slip, some don't come out at all. People talk about buses idling on the far side, engines humming, windows covered with sheets. Nobody sees where they go. Some say north, some say across the river, some say nowhere at all. I can't confirm any of it. What I know is that families don't walk back together. A mother with 2 kids might return with 1 or none. The neighbors whisper about it in stairwells, careful to keep their voices lower than the hum of the generators. They whisper because everyone's afraid the walls have ears, and maybe they do. The power is weaker than ever. Most blocks run dark now. The few that glow at night do so under floodlights powered by their machines, not ours. It's a warning more than a gift. A way of saying this corner belongs to them, not you. People in those zones don't sit by the window after dusk. They pull blankets tight and try not to cough too loud. And in the darker neighborhoods, it's a different kind of quiet. The sound of glass being pried loose, the quick shuffle of feet. Some streets guard themselves, men and women standing watch in shifts, making signals with flashlights hidden under coats. Others give up and hope being small and still keeps them overlooked. I don't know which choice is safer. Someone passed me a note this morning written on the back of a cigarette carton. It said that in Camden, the water pumps cut out completely. People are melting snow in buckets on rooftops just to make tea. Down in South Philly, I heard that a group dug out an old hand pump that hadn't been touched in 50 years, rusted to the bone, but with work, they made it run again. That's the story I want you to hear. For every street that bends under weight, another finds a way to push back, even if it's just pulling water out of the ground the old way. That's survival. That's what's left to us now. Tools that don't need signals, fire that doesn't need wires, and trust that isn't written down on slips of paper. I don't pretend to know how this ends. Some days I feel like we're in the first chapter of something we don't want to read, and other days I tell myself we're already halfway through. What I know is that we're still here. You're listening. I'm speaking. The city hasn't fallen silent yet. So breathe deep, ration slow, and remember the simple things. Check on your neighbor. Keep your fire safe. Boil your water. Write your notes on scraps no one would think to search. And keep the dial near this number. If you can hear me, then the occupation hasn't taken everything. Not yet. It's 6:41 in the evening, and the city feels heavier than it did this morning. This is Garrett John, still on 107.9 FM, talking to whoever's out there with a radio that hasn't gone quiet yet. The sun is gone, though it's hard to call it sunset when the sky never really brightens the way it used to. The haze hangs so thick you can't tell where the day ends and the night begins. What you can tell is the difference in the air once the curfew hour hits. Doors shut harder, streets echo longer. The silence deepens until the only sound is the engines of their trucks crawling down Broad and Spring Garden like steel animals circling their cages. I walked up the back stairwell before sitting down at this mic and held my breath at the top step. You can hear them better that way. Boots on asphalt, the scrape of metal gates pulled halfway closed, the distant crackle of loudspeakers repeating the same orders they've been drilling into us since the first week. Stay inside. Keep your papers. Report gatherings. The same rhythm, over and over, like they're trying to pound it into our bones. But there's something different tonight. The speakers are pausing longer between messages, as if someone's waiting for a reply they're not getting. I don't know if that's a glitch or if it means people are ignoring them in bigger numbers now. Either way, I'm noting it, because small changes are all we have to measure. The neighborhood feels split down the middle these days. Some are bending under the rules, lining up at the centers, handing over what they're told, keeping their heads down. Others are holding out, sharing scraps behind closed doors, passing jars of rice through cracked open hallways, tapping once on the floor to let the neighbor downstairs know they're still alive. The tension between those two groups is growing, and I can feel it like a pulse through the walls. You don't need a gun to make enemies out of people. Hunger and fear do the job faster. I've heard whole families moved overnight because one neighbor whispered that another was hiding food. And I've heard of streets that guard each other so well not even the patrols bother to test them. It all depends on trust. That's the rarest currency left. I caught word of something I don't know how to process yet. A man from Kensington swears he saw foreign uniforms moving into the old transit hub. Not just trucks and drones this time, but boots, unloading equipment, digging in. He said they've stacked crates taller than a man inside the concourse. Crates stamped with symbols none of us recognize. They're turning our bones into their storage, piece by piece. Whether it's weapons, rations, or tools, I can't say. What I can say is if they're settling into places like that, they're not thinking about leaving. This isn't a raid anymore. It's a claim. And that should weigh on us all. I'll tell you something else, because I promised not to coat this in comfort. People are vanishing. Not in the numbers you'd call a sweep. Not yet. But in 2s and 3s. An old man from my block who used to play cards outside the deli. 2 teenagers who used to paint graffiti on the rail bridge. A mother who stood in line for water 2 mornings ago and never walked back. The speakers don't mention them. The news doesn't speak of them. But the stairwells do. The stairwells carry whispers, and whispers are harder to erase than broadcasts. Pay attention to the whispers, because that's where the truth hides now. I know I sound worn. I am. My throat aches, and my hands shake when I turn the knobs on this rack of half-broken gear. But I'll keep speaking until I can't, because as long as a voice cuts through the static, the city hasn't been silenced. You, listening in the dark, need to remember this. The occupation doesn't win just by taking streets or buildings. They win when we stop telling each other what's happening. So tell it. In stairwells, on rooftops, scratched into notebooks, whispered over fences. Tell it so we stay real to each other. Tell it so the silence doesn't swallow us whole. It's 11:18 at night, and the city feels like it's holding its breath. This is Garrett John, still on 107.9 FM, still burning through the last of tonight's charge. If you're listening, the streets outside your window are probably as empty as mine. No cars, no buses, no neon signs buzzing over late-night diners. Just the hum of patrol engines and the occasional stutter of a drone slicing the air. The sound is different after curfew. Slower, more deliberate. Like they're reminding us that they own the night, and all we can do is hide inside it. I can't lie to you. Tonight feels heavier than most. A neighbor came to my door around dusk, eyes wide like she'd seen something she couldn't make sense of. She said the speakers on her block cut off mid-sentence, right as they were announcing another ration line. Dead air for a full minute, and then a voice that wasn't the usual one came through. Not the flat, clipped translation we've all grown used to, but something softer. Almost human. Almost tired. It said, "Stay where you are. Help is closer than you think." Then the static returned and the loop started again. She swore it wasn't a trick, swore it sounded like someone here, not them. Maybe it was interference. Maybe someone hacked the feed. Maybe it was just hope dressing itself up as sound. But I'm telling you because if it happened once, it could happen again. And we should be ready to catch it when it does. The fear now isn't just of what's outside, it's of what's missing. The news channels are gone, completely dark. No anchors fumbling through the script, no scrolls at the bottom of the screen. Just black frames or static when you try to tune in. Whatever was left of their voice has been smothered. All that remains are the loudspeakers and the foreign feeds, repeating orders like a broken metronome. It makes you wonder how many people out there even know what day it is anymore. I've been scratching lines into the wall behind this desk to keep track. 10 marks, then a cross through the middle. I count back and wonder if I'm even close. They've taken time from us as much as space. I heard something else tonight. Distant gunfire, sharp and rolling, out toward the river. Not fireworks, not the random pop of someone settling an argument in the dark. This was organized, a burst, then silence, then another. If someone out there is still fighting, they're not doing it for territory. They're doing it to remind us that it's possible. And that's enough to make the trucks roll heavier through the main roads afterward, engines low, lights sweeping wider than usual. That's enough to make the drones hover longer outside dark windows, listening for movement. That's enough to remind us that they're scared too, or they wouldn't press this hard. I'm not going to tell you it's getting easier. It isn't. People are thinner. Patience is shorter. Hope feels like a rationed thing itself, something you dole out carefully so you don't run out too fast. But here's the truth I see when I watch this city from a rooftop at dusk. Even with the weight pressing down, even with their orders and their eyes in the sky, people are still moving. Quietly, carefully, but moving. Sharing bread, patching roofs, carrying buckets, passing notes, keeping watch. They haven't killed the will to live. Not yet. And as long as that's true, we're not finished. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until the silence takes every voice. And I promise you, I'll keep mine alive until the last battery burns out. It's 4:12 in the morning, and I can feel the chill of the concrete through the chair. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM, whispering into the dark while the rest of the city pretends to sleep. The generators have gone quiet in my part of town, either out of fuel or out of fear. When I opened the stairwell door a crack an hour ago, I didn't hear a single truck, not one engine, not one drone. Just the hollow sound of the wind dragging loose paper down the street. It should feel like a gift, this kind of quiet, but instead it feels like a question. Why have they gone silent? What are they waiting for? Out east, toward the water, there's a faint glow that doesn't belong to sunrise. Too steady, too orange. Could be fires left to burn because nobody has the means to put them out. Could be something they lit on purpose, to flush people from hiding. I can't tell from here, and I don't dare climb higher to look. The rooftops aren't safe anymore. Too many stories of drones catching the reflection of a lantern, the glint of a pot, even the shine of someone's eyes. When they spot you, the hum deepens, and then you run or you don't. Word came through scratched handwriting passed along from block to block. 3 men and a woman pulled from their homes near Girard last night. Neighbors say they weren't resisting, weren't armed, just taken. No explanation, no return. People say the trucks went north after, past the old breweries. Nobody knows if it's a prison camp, a processing center, or just another place people vanish. These are the whispers I keep hearing. And they spread faster than any broadcast. Fear doesn't need a transmitter. It needs ears and a heart that won't stop pounding. I keep thinking about how fast normal life peeled away. 3 weeks ago, people still lined up at bus stops, clutching coffee cups, scrolling dead phones out of habit. A week later, the buses were carcasses at the side of the road, stripped of anything useful. Yesterday, I saw a boy dragging an office chair down the street like treasure, because it had wheels and he could stack jugs on it. That's what we are now. People who repurpose what's left, not for comfort, but to carry water, to carry food, to carry each other. The smallest things have become lifelines. My voice is shaking because I'm tired. Because every time I stop to breathe between words, I wonder if I'll hear boots on the stairs. But if I stop speaking, if I let the silence eat this frequency, then the occupation wins without firing a shot. So here's what I'll tell you before I fade for the hour. Write down the names of those you love. Write them on scraps, on walls, on notebooks. Keep them alive in ink and memory. Because the one thing they can't register, can't screen, can't ration is our stories. As long as we remember who we are, this city isn't theirs. Not completely. Not yet. It's 8:55 in the morning, and the light leaking through the cracks in the basement door doesn't feel like morning at all. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM, still here, still running on the wine of batteries that are too tired for their own good. The air outside smells like smoke carried in from the west, maybe a warehouse fire, maybe a row of homes left to burn. The city isn't being put back together anymore. It's being left to rot where it falls. You can see it in the way the trash piles up, in the way the rats have gotten bolder, in the way no one bothers to clear broken glass from the sidewalks. Nobody's cleaning. Nobody's fixing. It's all collapse, slow and steady, like watching a roof cave in one beam at a time. The loudspeakers started late today. Usually by sunrise, they're barking about curfew, ration points, compliance. But the first message didn't come until after 8, and when it did, it was shorter, clipped, almost sloppy. Registration center, broad and federal, mandatory, no full sentences, no polite translations, no layers of false calm, just blunt orders. Either they're slipping or they've stopped caring how it sounds. A woman I spoke with last night, one of the few who still dares to knock quietly and trade news, thinks it means they're stretched thin. Too many mouths to track, too many blocks to cover. She said she saw the same patrol truck roll past her street 3 times in 1 hour, like they had no one else to send. If that's true, it means cracks are showing, even if small. But with cracks comes danger. 2 streets over, in a corner store long since emptied of food, someone painted a message across the metal gate in red. We are still here. By dawn, the gate was gone, and so were the people in the apartments above it. No one saw the truck, no one heard boots, but the silence left behind tells enough. We all want to remind them we exist, but every shout brings risk. Some try anyway. Some can't help it. Some believe the risk is worth it. I can't say they're wrong, but I can't tell you it's safe either. There's talk, whispers carried through stairwells and alleys, that a resistance group hit a convoy near the river. Small, quick, 1 truck torched, the rest scattered. No proof, no photos, just stories repeated with nervous smiles. And maybe that's the point. Even if it's not true, it gives people something to hold in their chest for a while. Maybe that's all a rumor has to do now. Be enough to keep a man walking another block, keep a mother lighting another stove. Hope doesn't need to be true to be useful, and they can't patrol inside our heads. Not yet. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm worn down. My voice feels raw. My hands are shaking worse than yesterday. The city presses down harder with every hour, and sometimes I think about what it would be like to just stop, to shut the mic off, to let the silence take this frequency, to save the last of the fuel for heat instead of words. But then I picture someone out there, someone huddled in a dark kitchen, turning the dial just to see if any voices are left. I picture them hearing static, then nothing, and deciding maybe it's all over. I can't do that to them. I can't do that to myself. So I'll keep this alive. I'll keep telling you what I see, what I hear, what I know. And I'll remind you again. Stay low, stay quiet, share carefully. Use old tools when you can. Paper maps, candles, buckets, rope. Write notes that don't look like notes. And above all, remember that we are still here, even if we have to whisper it instead of painting it on walls. That's enough for now. That's survival, and survival is all the defiance we have left. It's 1:32 in the afternoon, and the air outside has turned sharp, like the kind of cold that bites at your teeth when you breathe in too fast. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM, and the generator is giving me just enough juice to keep this voice alive for another stretch. The streets above me aren't silent today. They're restless. You can feel it in the way sound carries. Doors slamming, boots on pavement, the metallic whine of trucks pushing down streets they don't usually bother with. Something's shifting, and you can sense it, even if you don't know what it is yet. From where I sit, I can hear faint echoes bouncing off the high rises, orders shouted through megaphones instead of just the speakers. That's new. They usually rely on recorded loops, voices that don't falter, don't stutter. But today, there are real voices, and they sound impatient. Short bursts of words I don't understand, followed by commands in English. Stay inside. Keep doors closed. Do not gather. It's sharper, harder, as if they've grown tired of pretending. Maybe the mask of calm is slipping. Or maybe they want us to feel the edge of their anger now. I've been told the northern blocks are tighter than ever. Someone passed me a scrap of paper folded into a matchbook, said patrols are stopping anyone with bags, searching door to door in Kensington. They're looking for something, though nobody knows what. Guns, radios, people, doesn't matter. The searches themselves are enough to unravel trust on those streets. I heard one man was dragged out for keeping a ham set in his closet, and when the neighbors saw it, some of them turned their own radios off out of fear. That's how occupation works. They don't need to silence us all, just enough to make us believe silence is safer. But silence isn't safer. Yesterday evening I watched from a window as a block down near Tasker gathered in a way that wasn't loud, but wasn't hidden either. 15, maybe 20 people moving in and out of an alley, passing pots, blankets, cans. Kids darting between them with that strange bravery only kids can have. Laughter slipping out even though the sky was heavy with drones. They weren't fighting, weren't shouting, just living, together, in the open. And you know what? The patrol truck rolled past once, slowed, and then kept going. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe even they knew what it would mean to break up something that human. I'm not here to give you false hope. I can't promise you the block at Tasker is still whole today, but I can tell you that for one night, they reminded the rest of us what it looks like to live without bending. And that matters. Every little reminder matters, because it gives us something to measure ourselves against when the walls close tighter. I won't pretend my own strength doesn't crack. My throat's rough, my chest aches when I talk too long, and sometimes I stare at the dead light bulbs above my head and imagine the hum of old neon signs, the way the city used to glow even at noon. That memory hurts, but it also keeps me steady. Because if we built it once, we can build it again. That's not a promise. It's a task waiting for the day when their grip loosens, when their trucks roll less, when their speakers stop working. Until then, hold each other close. Trade without fear when you can. Whisper when you must. Write down the truths so no one forgets what happened here. They can burn paper, but they can't erase memory passed from mouth to mouth, kitchen to kitchen, block to block. That's the thread that will outlast them. You're listening to 107.9 FM. My name is Garrett John, and as long as I have breath and a charge, I'll be here to remind you that this city is still ours in the ways that matter most. It's 7:06 in the evening, and the city feels like it's been nailed shut. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM, still on the line, still speaking into the hum of half-dead batteries. The light has drained from the sky, though you wouldn't know it behind the gray curtain that's been hanging since morning. What you can tell is the change in the air once the speakers snap on for curfew. The voice they use is clipped, sharp, with that same cold edge that makes the words feel less like instructions and more like threats. Remain indoors. Do not resist. Violations will be punished. They don't even try to hide it anymore. I sat in the stairwell as the trucks rolled through my street. You could feel the rumble in the walls. Their headlights sweep across brick and broken glass, catching faces that retreat too slow from the windows. Nobody dares lean out anymore. One neighbor, an old man who used to play his radio too loud in the summer, left his curtains cracked, and within minutes, they were pounding on his door. He hasn't been back since. The sound of that door splintering still echoes in my chest. That's how they do it now. Make examples. One loud knock, and everyone else pulls their blinds tighter. But even as fear thickens, there are flickers of something else. A woman I know from 2 blocks south slipped me a tin can wrapped in cloth this morning. Inside, beans she'd cooked over a candle flame. She said, "I had enough for 2 meals, so now we both eat once." It wasn't about filling my stomach. It was about reminding me, and herself, that giving is still possible. You can't measure hope in speeches. You measure it in beans passed hand to hand. The whispers carry more weight than ever. I keep hearing about buses. Not the city buses we lost weeks ago, but military-style transports that roll out of the old depot at night, loaded with people who never come back. Some swear they're taken to camps north of the city. Some say across the river. Some believe they're just driven out and abandoned. No one knows the truth, but the absence is real. Apartment doors stay shut, names go unspoken. Chairs around tables sit empty. They don't need to kill every voice. Just enough to keep the rest of us guessing who will vanish next. There's talk of resistance too. Small, quick strikes. A checkpoint sabotaged near the river. A supply truck hijacked and stripped before they could send reinforcements. It's never more than a whisper, never confirmed, but it travels fast, carried like a spark on the wind. Maybe some of it is rumor. Maybe all of it is. But even a rumor can light a candle in the dark, can make someone feel less alone for one more night. That's why they try so hard to smother it, why the speakers repeat their lies louder every day. I'll be honest, I'm tired. My throat aches. My body feels like it's carrying stones, and sometimes I wonder if these words are worth the fuel I burn to send them out. But then I picture someone alone in a dark kitchen, twisting the dial, just needing to hear another voice to know they're not the last. That's why I keep going. That's why I'll keep going until the last battery dies. Remember this: survival is not just breath in your lungs. It's the act of refusing silence. So whisper to your neighbors. Write down the names of those you've lost. Share your beans, your bread, your scraps of news. They can't occupy what we refuse to give them. Not memory, not kindness, not truth. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM. I'm still here. You are too. And that means the city hasn't gone quiet yet. It's 12:21 after midnight, and the air is cold enough to sting the skin if you step outside without a coat. This is Garrett John on 107.9 FM. Still speaking, still alive, still watching a city that feels less like a home and more like a locked cage every day. The streets above me are empty now, but not in the way they used to be after a storm or blackout. This emptiness is forced, deliberate. The loudspeakers shut down an hour ago, and when they went quiet, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like someone lifting their hand from your throat, only to remind you they can squeeze again whenever they want. I leaned against the basement door earlier, ear pressed to the crack, and the silence outside was thick enough to make me dizzy. Not a truck, not a drone, not even the sound of boots. Just the faint creak of a sign swaying on rusted hinges. When the noise machine goes quiet, you start to hear yourself too much. Your own breath, your own heartbeat, the way your teeth grind when you're holding them shut to keep from shaking. That's the kind of silence we live with now, not the calm kind. The kind that feels like a trap waiting to spring. People are disappearing faster. I know I've said that before, but tonight it feels undeniable. A friend from up near Fairmount wrote me a note and slid it under the shop door before dusk. His sister, gone. Apartment door still locked from the inside. No sign of struggle. But she's gone. He said the patrols were heavy on their street the night before, trucks idling for hours. He doesn't know if she was taken or if she went willingly just to escape. That's the horror of it. We don't know anymore which is worse, being dragged out or walking into the night on your own. Either way, another chair sits empty at another table. The checkpoints are tightening. I've heard they're stopping people not just at bridges but at random corners, pulling them into the back of trucks for screening. What they're screening for, no one knows. Some people come back hours later, shaken but whole. Others don't. It's turning neighbor against neighbor. You see someone walk out and not return, and you start wondering, did they talk too loud? Did they keep too much food for themselves? Did someone point a finger? These thoughts crawl into your head and eat at you until trust feels impossible. That's their goal. Fear doesn't just divide us from them. It divides us from each other. And yet, I saw something tonight that kept me from drowning in that fear completely. A woman 3 doors down from here lit a candle in her window. Not for heat, not for light, but as a signal. Within minutes, 2 more windows on the block lit up, a chain of small flames glowing against the dark like tiny beacons saying, "We're still here." It was risky, too risky if a patrol caught sight of it, but it happened anyway. I watched from my crack in the basement door, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone. Those flames were enough to remind me that even under all this weight, people still find ways to say, "We exist." I'm tired. I'm cold. My throat feels like sandpaper, and every time I pause, I wonder if the static will swallow me before I can speak again. But I'll keep talking as long as this frequency holds, because silence is their weapon, and I won't hand it to them willingly. If you're listening right now, in the dark, know this. You're not the last. You're not the only one twisting the dial hoping for proof of life. We're scattered. Yes. We're scared. Yes. But we're here. And as long as I can still burn a little fuel, this voice will keep cutting through the static. This is Garrett John, 107.9 FM. Hold on. Breathe steady. And if you can, light a candle tonight. Not for warmth, but for each other.